Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We are your hosts, Karan and Kristen. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble.
Today we are talking with Jess Lynn. Jess is a licensed clinical social worker and a non-monogamous relationship coach. Jess loves living life outside the box and helps others live unconventionally as well. Jess guides people who are exploring non-monogamy to create healthy and fulfilling relationships. Living life on your own terms takes courage, and Jess helps her clients to create their own map and follow their inner compass. And Jess, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, one of the things like Quran was read in our intro is the hardest rules to break are your own. And that's one of the things that we're looking forward to talking to you about today as well, with like how you work with people to help break their inner rules to live life on their own terms. So yeah, we're excited for that. And first, would you like to hear this poem that we have for you?
Of course, yeah. See what Google's got today.
Yeah. So, in a world of norms, she sails the... Sorry, let me stand up and get my eyes. All right. In a world of norms, she sails against the tide, a maverick soul, a rebel with a guide. Jess Lynn, the compass for hearts that dare, unconventional, breaking free from every snare. With wisdom and compassion, she lights the way, guiding souls to embrace the unconventional sway. A beacon of hope, a voice that sets hearts free. Jess Lynn the pirate, carving her own destiny. She challenges beliefs, societal bonds, and she breaks, empowering others to create their own unique takes. Wait, no, that's lakes. So empowering others to create their own unique lakes. In her wake, a trail of love and truth, Jess Lynn, the artist, painting life's uncouth. With gentle hands, she holds space for growth, a sanctuary for souls to explore and both. Through her teachings, light shines bright. Jess Lynn, the healer, guiding us into the night. Her journey, a tapestry of courage and grace, inspiring others to follow their own unique pace. Jess Lynn, the pirate, the artist, the healer, the guide, a force of change, a spirit that cannot be denied.
That's cool.
I like it. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Also, Google poems are getting longer.
They are.
It's getting smarter, and it's like, now I'm great. I'm going to give you more. Right.
Yeah.
We've got to go into all the metaphors that we can. So yeah. Well, Jess, we'd love to hear, start off by hearing a little bit about you and your journey. How you got, what led you to the path that you're on now today?
Yeah. That's always the question, and always an interesting answer. I never know where to start. So let's see. Yeah, I mean, I would say that I would say growing up, I was a pretty conventional person. I was definitely like I still am super type A, but super type A, super follow the rules, all that kind of good stuff. And I don't know where exactly the switch happened, probably somewhere in college. But in terms of like where I am now and what I do for a living and helping people into non-monogamy, that has been like semi more recent development. essentially, several years ago, I came out to myself, I suppose, and my husband and, the internets, as bisexual. I would no longer use that term. I would use queer now. But it was one of those funny things where you say this to your friends and they're all like, yeah, like, we know you didn't know. And I'm like, I mean, I don't know. I guess they did somewhere, right? And so coming out, in a heterosexual presenting marriage, I'm married to a cisgender man. And, that I think to some extent, people were like really supportive of that. Like I remember putting on Instagram and all that stuff, and everyone was like, good for you. Thank you for saying that, like, just because you are in your later 20s and you're married to a man, that does not mean that you're straight. We should not assume these things. People can, figure these things out at any point in life. And that was like really well received. And what people didn't know, and what I did not advertise at the time, was that in conjunction with coming out to my husband, I also asked, I guess, sort of suggested that we consider opening our relationship, our marriage, so that I could pursue relationships, physical or emotional, romantic, with women, which I had never really done before. And of course, there's the whole story of how that whole thing went. And for myself and all of my clients, I don't think there's ever like a perfect way that goes. It's not like something people are expecting to hear from you. And so that was really the beginning of my journey. And then through that, and my like already having the skills as a therapist in my other life, as I like to say, I realized that there was such a need for folks who were exploring any kind of open relationship to have support. And I was finding that a lot of even other mental health professionals were either not super open about this idea, and or were, but didn't really have like a lot of education or training or experience in that area. And so that is when I started my second business, coaching, specifically coaching folks entering into non-monogamy in any way, whether it was like me, where they're coming as part of what I call an OG couple, like an established couple opening, or just coming in, kind of from the ground. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of like the summation of like where this all kind of started several years ago.
I just kind of want to go back a little bit into that, like, I guess that kind of later in life kind of realization that like you're not necessarily like about like heteronormative, and maybe that's not quite who you are or what you're about. What was that? I mean, how was that received for you? Like, how's that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, of course, looking back now, like where I am now compared to then, it's so funny to me that I was so unaware myself, or so confused, or, not being sure about this. Because the reality is, prior to that time, I had like, I think this is a pretty like typical experience of like women coming out as anything other than straight later in life. I had like made out with women and stuff, but I think there's just this cultural thing that's like, oh yeah, the girls make out, like it's fine, right? That doesn't mean anything. And sometimes it doesn't have to mean anything, but if it means something to you, then it means something to you. And so, I think when I first came out, I had a variety of responses. I think for the most part, it was really great, and people were very either kind of like not surprised and like, well, yeah, Jess, like everyone and their mother knew that except for you, apparently. Or just kind of like, I'm very lucky that that at the point in history that we're at least for me in that moment, it wasn't this like huge, oh my God, like this is a problem or whatever. I do think, to be honest, that there's some part of the fact that I was married to a man that mitigated some of that, right? Because people are thinking, whether they're consciously thinking or not, people who maybe weren't super close to me, but were seeing this, I imagine their thought process is like, oh, great. Like she's being more her authentic self. She's putting it out there and cool for her. But that's it, right? She's married to a guy. So we're never going to see any, kind of other thing go on here. So I mean, behind the scenes, people had no idea like what else was going on. But so I think it was like overall really well received. I did have some people say things like, I would say to people, I'm bisexual, and I would have some people say like, I don't know if you are, and I'm like, it's not how that works.
Thanks for letting me know.
Like, I don't know if you are. And I think a lot of that was from like older folks in my life. And I think most of that was more so coming from like, you don't have to feel weird or different, or like, you just are you. And like, you don't have to put a label on it. You don't have to, right? And I mean, that's something I work with a lot now, is like this idea of a label. And I do believe that labels are only beneficial to the extent that they benefit you. And we don't have to put labels on things just for the heck of it. But for me, in that moment, like that label meant quite a lot to me, to have this language to describe like how I saw myself and who I was attracted to, and all that kind of stuff. So overall, well received, with a little like, some question marks, but nothing like crazy. It was, nobody reacted poorly. And I know that that's not everyone's experience. So I am very lucky in that regard, for sure.
And that leads to my follow-up question with that. So, because I imagine when, like you had said, when you were telling people that part of your news, that there might have been an assumed safety there as well. Like, oh, okay, well, but you're married and you're in a straight relationship. So like, whatever, here, it's not like this big explosion of news. But how did they receive once you started talking about the next part of it, where you opened your relationship, and then eventually, with the non-monogamous relationships as well? How was that received?
Very differently. I'm sure that's not surprising. It's really amazing to me. I think obviously I'm one individual person having one individual experience, right? But I do find it so interesting as like a queer and polyamorous person that historically, like there's the point in time at which like you are not coming out as anything other than straight and having any kind of positive reception whatsoever, right? And of course, we are not in a great place when it comes to those things. And there is a lot more acceptance in general, right? Like, of course, there's still really horrible things that happen, and a lot of people don't have that kind of reception, but a lot of people do, right? And I found it so interesting that like that would not be like really all that shocking or that big of a deal to people, but then when it's followed by, and so we're going to open our relationships so that I can experience that, it was like, oh, now you've gone too far. Like this is what? And I do find it funny too, to some extent, because, people reflected back to me, like, we're not surprised that you're not straight. And in my head, I also don't think that they should have been surprised that I was polyamorous, because that is how that's how I've always loved people. Some poly folks experience polyamory as an identity, like very similarly akin to sexuality, in that, like, if I look back over all of my relationships, I always had feelings for more than one person. I always was shoving myself into this box of monogamy. I always was going like as little as 1, 2, 3 days in between, like, I was young, but what were considered committed relationships at that time. And people are always commenting on like, how could you move on so fast? You clearly didn't love him. You clearly didn't love that guy, right? Or whatever else. So to me now, it is not surprising. But at the time, I think people, I don't know, I guess there's just like a level to which we're, to some extent, we're used to hearing certain things, right? And I think even though we don't have like the perfect reception of queer folks coming out, I don't think it's something people are like surprised to hear in general, right? Like we have heard this rhetoric, even though there are still people who are very much rude, to be honest, about it. I think the non-monogamous thing, we're not really very used to hearing. And so I think for a lot of people, when that part kind of came around, that was like a whole other level, a whole different thing. And yeah, I mean, I think there's so much there, but it's very, very interesting to me, because the reality is that so much of this is based on like what we've been taught to think. And, you know, we're not in the habit of like going down deep inside of us, pulling up that stuff about like, what is a relationship? What do I believe about relationships? And actually examining it and deciding like, I actually want to be monogamous because I've weighed the options and that is the one for me, right? I don't think that that's like a thing that we're typically called to do. And so I think when someone you're close to tells you that they have chosen a different option that you maybe didn't even think was an option, that also can kind of like shock people into like their own stuff, right? Like, oh, what does that mean? Like, you know, kind of bringing up stuff of their own as well, which is totally fine and human. But yeah, it was very different for sure.
Well, and do you think it's just like a continuing shift in like quote unquote morals and that? Sorry, but I'm sure you guys can hear the dogs in the background. But like where now being queer is a lot more accepted in normal regular society, that like people are still seeing like non-monogamy as like, you know, not moral or whatever. So it's like, oh well, and it's almost the same as when you came out but had a husband, like, oh well, it's okay if you're queer because you're in this committed monogamous relationship, so it's still fine. But now you're like moving even further outside of those, like the bounds of what people will like just have decided is like their morals.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many pieces to it, right? Morality, this like it kind of imposed morality, I think is a big part of it, right? Because if we think about folks, and I mean, it's not that I don't have any of these people in my life, like folks who are very like, I don't even know how to say anti-queer because I don't know how you can be anti something that people aren't choosing, but whatever. But like people who don't get it and who are would have a poor reaction if their child or someone in their family, right? It is about morality, right? That's not right. That's not good. That's not what we're supposed to do. That's not the way we were made. That's not right. And so yeah, there's like some of that still lingers, 100%, and in certain cultures more than others, in certain families and certain religions more than others. And then even for folks who are like, yeah, no, like, cool, you're queer. Like, that's just who you are. That's just how you're born, right? I think then the secondary part of, you know, non-monogamy is like, oh no, but wait, that's wrong. Like, that's not the number of assumptions, right? Like, I like make a list in my head, and I use this with my clients of like the most common responses that I get when I tell people. And most of the time, the first thing out of people's mouth is, I could never. And my response to that is, so then don't. You shouldn't. Like, please don't. Like, I am not telling you that this is like superior or better or more evolved or anything like that. I'm just saying, you choose your relationship structure and I'll choose mine. But yeah, I think there is a piece of it for sure that's this morality around like what does a quote unquote committed relationship, what does that mean? And if we do live in a society where, and I think we've seen this kind of shift as well, like we live in a society where still very much the like ultimate form of relationship is a monogamous marriage, right? And, I think we've seen, I'm a millennial, and so obviously like within my generation, there are lots of people choosing to live together and not get married. There are lots of people that get engaged and never get married. There are lots of people who buy a house before they, and so I think there's shifts in that way too. But I think ultimately there's still this underlying like feeling of like, okay, fine, you don't want to get married. Maybe I don't get it, but like, fine, like you're still in a committed monogamous relationship. You live together. Clearly you're committed. Clearly you respect each other. Clearly this is real love, right? And then when you like take a hard right turn out of that station, people are like, that's not, like, that can't be real love. You can't be committed. That's not what this is supposed to look like. So yeah, I think there's so many like pieces to it that people really, the reality is people are either they don't know what they don't know, which I do not blame them for, because I did not know anything about this when I started. It was just an idea. But we had to do so much work and counseling and research and all that stuff, right? So I don't blame people when they are genuinely curious and say like, I don't understand, or I have questions. I will answer any question you have. There is no such thing as TMI. It's fine. It's more so when people are like, they just don't, there's no desire to try to like understand a person different from you. And it's just like projection of morals, that because you don't understand, that must mean that I'm wrong. That's, it's stickier, obviously.
Yeah. And like one of the things too, like I was listening to your interview on the Sex Pod podcast, and one of the things that came up there was first, you as a person, like when you're taking these steps to determine like, what does a relationship look like to me? What do I want it to look like? There, like you're saying, there's all these societal beliefs that are there that we've got to determine, like, do I agree with these? Do these feel like the ones that I want, that do ring true to me? Or am I just going along with this because that's what I've been told? And it's a lot of like really personally digging in to figure out like, who am I? What do I believe? And then once you get past that and you start sharing it with others, you're now also meeting them at a place where they now are like, oh, I have to start questioning this as well. Who am I? What do I believe? Which could be part of that pushback also. But yeah, it can be really hard when that mirror is put in front of you to be like, oh, they don't believe the same thing I do, but now why do I believe this?
Yeah. And I tell my clients that all the time, that like, one thing to keep in mind, this is not an excuse for people to treat us unkindly. I don't believe that there's an excuse for unkindness. I think that we can give people grace in terms of like not knowing what they don't know, right? And so I tell people all the time, when we talk about like, are you going to share this with other people in your life, whether that's like being open online or just telling family or whatever, remember that you are meeting a person who has not done the work that you've done to decide within yourself, okay, these are the things that I thought I believed. Is that true? Am I actually actively choosing these, or am I defaulting? Those are very different things, right? And it's fine to default. Sometimes we cannot possibly be like making every decision we ever make act. It's exhausting. Like, it's okay to default, but just know that you're doing that, right? And that's what I always tell people is like, you need to remember that when you come to that person to tell them this about yourself, you've done so much work to get to where you are. And you've also had to work through all of the mononormativity, all of what your own rules that you took from society are, but also like whatever rules you gave yourself based on society, you've worked through all that. This person that you're telling has not done that. They haven't done that for themselves, and they haven't done that like on the whole for society, right? And so just remember that if you get a weird response is like, this might be something that this person has quite literally never given a thought to ever in their life. And now you're saying this to them for the first time.
Mm-hmm. This may be a silly question because I don't know a lot about like the area where you're from. Is it quite like a progressive area? It doesn't, or like a little more conservative?
Yeah, it's where I am now in Delaware. Yeah, I mean, like on the whole, is a pretty blue state. I would say a fairly liberal area. I am not from a liberal area, nor is my husband. And so that's also part of, right, like wherever you're from and like taking your background, whatever that looks like, into consideration. But yeah, I mean, here where I am now, it's pretty liberal. We're like within 40 minutes of Philadelphia, you know, it's pretty good. I've
That's good.
been able to meet other people who are non-monogamous where I live. Let's put it that way.
Well, and I just mentioned that because I feel like in Vancouver, which is like uber kind of progressive, that like it's so common to have like to know and to be around people that are in polyamorous relationships. So I was just wondering and curious what it's like in other areas. What is it like in Portland? I imagine it's similar in Portland.
Yeah. Portland's pretty open to all types of different lifestyles, choices. Like it's very well, the whole West Coast, I would say, of the United States is well known for being more open to those types of conversations. But
I was just curious.
Yeah,
I don't know a lot about Delaware. So.
That's okay. It's honestly, it's a fine place. There's not much to know. It's a very tiny state. We don't have sales tax. That is our claim to fame.
Same as Portland, right?
We don't either.
But you guys so much in common.
Yeah, that's our big deal is sales tax. So yeah, but I think geography has a lot to do with it. And obviously, like I work with people who like are all over the US, but also in other countries. And like there are huge differences in terms of like where people live or where their families are from or whatever with this kind of stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I would say too, like out here on the West Coast in particular, it's going to be a lot easier to have that type of conversation. Like I'm in an open relationship, or like even like running into people that are transgender is a lot more common too. Like getting to know people that are making all kinds of different choices in their life. But from the Midwest, where I come from, that's not something you're going to run into as often. So I imagine starting a conversation like that in areas, that are very much more conservative. It's going to be a lot harder to, especially internally, to face like this is how I'm feeling, but like, how do I take the steps and how do I have these conversations?
Yeah. And so how do you advise people who like, tell us about the like coaching works that you do.
Yeah. So I currently run a 12-week, right now it's a group coaching program. It's called Non-Monogamous Newbies. And so basically the entire point is, you know, if you are new-ish, and I say that to say, you know, if you're like literally, we decided yesterday that this is definitely what we're doing or definitely what I'm doing, and I don't know where to start and I want to do this right. Great. I also have had clients who like have been practicing non-monogamy for a while and kind of realize that they like skipped some steps and are like, shoot, we did not maybe do the communication work, the like relationship agreement work, thinking about our own personal boundaries. Like we didn't do that work. And now the things we're running into are those things. And we're like hitting a wall. And so I have folks like that too. So new-ish. And really, I mean, we talk about so many things. It's kind of my like distilled version of everything that I like read about, learned, listened to podcasts, articles, books, therapy, like all that stuff. Because there is information out there and it can be hard sometimes to like take that information and actually apply it to your like real life. Because, you know, you read something and you're like, okay, but like my life isn't quite like that because I have like this number of partners or this is the relationship between these people or whatever. And so it's my like distilled version of like basically the top like 10 to 12 topics that you need to have and cover to have a good foundation to start out. And of course, one of those things is talking to other people. And in terms of like how I advise people, I really do tell everyone, like, you do not have to tell people is the reality. You get to choose. You get to choose as an individual. And obviously, as with anything in non-monogamy, you know, we want to consult anyone that we're connected to, right? Because we don't want to out somebody who doesn't want to be outed by association. So, you know, we talk through like, how do I decide if I want to do this at all? Tell people, and if so, who? Usually advise people make like a safe to tell list, like just your first like 2 to 5 people that you feel like either will have, in your opinion, and people surprise you all the time, but in your best guess, will have a neutral to positive reaction. I mean, I think it helps to start there, just because obviously the more negative reactions you get, the harder it becomes to continue the conversation. And so we start small, and I really encourage people to think about like, you know, setting boundaries around this conversation, and, you know, knowing for yourself, like, where are you going to pull the cord if you need to, right? Like, at what point, if someone is having a very negative reaction, or you're becoming triggered, or they're just straight up being rude or whatever, at what point do you walk away from that conversation? And like, let's think about that ahead of time, so you don't get in the middle of it and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. So we talk about that, and then we talk about like detail wise, like, what do you want to tell people? Do you just simply want them to know, like, hey, just so you know, like, there's been a change in my life. My established partner and I have opened our relationship, so we're both dating other people. You know, if anything, if I want to give any more details, I will, or if you have any questions, you can ask, right? All the way through to like, this is my second partner, right? Like, there's all kinds of versions of that. Some people just want to like inform people, and that's like the end of it, and they don't really want to talk about a lot of other things. Some people, you know, depending on their type of non-monogamy as well, may not want to share very many details. And so, you know, for me personally, as being polyamorous, specifically under the non-monogamy umbrella, I have now 2 long-term, what I absolutely consider life partners. So my other partner, who happens to be male, I promise this is not where I was going with this, but things happen. People ask me all the time, I thought, and I'm like, no, I don't know. But you know, both of my life partners, you know, neither of them are going anywhere. And so for me personally, it is important for me to have my other partner meet my friends, family, that kind of stuff. That's sometimes easier said than done. But someone might be practicing, you know, an open relationship in which it's more of like a physical sexual exploration, and they have maybe like friends with benefits, and they don't want anyone to know about that, or maybe only a select few people, or maybe that person doesn't want to meet people in their life, right? So I really encourage people overall to like try really hard not to be swayed by like what other people are doing, because it really is a personal decision to talk about.
And like, one of the things you talk about too is communication. Huge. And I'm curious as well, like, with your like, for you with your partners, they're both each your partner, but then like they probably also had some things that they had to work around too, to be able to be like, well, how do I want to explain the relationship to others as well? So yeah, like for you, and then within the partners too, like what kinds of boundaries and communication needed to be set up in order to make that successful, and for you all to be able to explain to, like, this is how our relationship is. And
yeah. So at this point where we've kind of, it feels like we're a little settled for now, but like life, you never know. But in terms of where we're at right now, my husband and I each have an additional partner. both of our other partners do not have other partners right now. That doesn't mean that they couldn't. It just currently is not the case. So when we all were kind of talking about this, it was easiest way to explain this is, so my husband is my nesting partner because we live together, nest. And then I have a non-nesting partner, so I don't live with him, right? So he had been polyamorous for a while before I met him. So a decent amount of like super, super close people to him knew he had another partner when we first got together. And so there did come a point where like he was going to have like a summer house party, and we had to talk about like, okay, if I'm invited, people are probably going to see you go and kiss that person and then go and kiss this person. And like, you don't have to explain that if you don't want to. But we had to talk about like, I'm okay with you sharing with people who I am and what's going on here, if that's something that you want to do. If not, people can stare all they want. I mean, and they're going to, it's fine. So, he decided at that point to like share with his coworkers. He's sort of been like techie-ness. And so I wouldn't say his coworkers were like super used to talking about like this kind of thing. They didn't really talk a ton about relationships and feelings and all that stuff. And so he told them, and it was like pretty fine. And, then slowly over time, it was like, okay, he wanted me to meet his family. They live out of state. We have to travel there, right? So sharing with them. And then my husband and I, obviously we've been together almost 10 years now. And so we have family and friends that are in common, right? We have a large group of friends that's started out as my friends, but they've adopted him. And same with family, right? We had, been family with these people for a while. And so we had to talk about like, who do we want to tell? Who do we want to tell first? What people do we think we might not get a good reception from? And do we not tell them at all? Do we wait? Like, how do we do that? In the very beginning, there also can be conversations around like, I was dating women and dating other people, and my husband did not at first date other people. He wasn't sure if he wanted to just stay monogamous or he wanted to explore this. And so then we had to have that conversation of like, how can we balance Jess's desire to be authentic and like be open with my husband's desire to not really do that right now. And he wasn't dating anyone else. So it was like, it was not an unbalance in a bad way, but it was just different. And so we kind of had to like start with our short list and then slowly add additional people, right? Like as he became more comfortable and I became more comfortable, as we did tell some people, and it was neutral to positive, who are we going to add? Who do you want to tell and why, right? Like what's coming up for you? What is making you feel compelled to tell this person? So a lot of conversations around like the why, which is like such a common conversation in non-monogamy, because we're making choices that are hard and are not always well received. So I think it's important for us all to like know, what is my like deeper why? Like, why do I want this person to know? How will I react if they don't take it well? All that stuff. And then as we kind of like grew what I would now call our family, and now there's 4 of us total, then it was his other partner is monogamous. She does not identify at all as not monogamous. And how is her family going to take this? And, just kind of repeating similar questions, but kind of nuanced to everyone's like current life situation.
I mean, I imagine like everything what you're saying is just really coming down to communication with like your partners and really being open about what your needs are and I guess boundaries for each of the partners and figuring out the best way to like navigate all of those in a way that's like respectful and feels feels right for everybody,
Mm.
which I
Yeah.
imagine can be really challenging.
I mean, sometimes. Yeah. I think one of the hardest things, especially in the beginning, is like, I thought we had great communication before. We had been to couples therapy 3 times preventatively, not because there was any particular issue. And, obviously as a therapist, I'm very pro therapy. So we did that. And I thought, we had like great communication, and we did. And this is like a whole other thing, because it's like we knew how to communicate, right? Like we had some good tools. We had some good like sentence starters or fill in the blanks so that we can like stay on track and not go off on a tangent, not go off in an emotional, upheaval, right? But the things that you then have to talk about is where it gets hard, because I think it's not, it's just not a conversation that anyone has told you to prepare to have, to say to your husband, I want to sleep with other men, right? Like that's not a thing that we're like, and that is not exactly how that came out. But like, I think I was fortunate to be taught, by my mother, by people in my life, that, marriage is not easy. Relationships, period, doesn't have to be marriage, are not easy. And you're going to have hard conversations. And if you are a person who wants a life partner, whatever that looks like, there's going to be hard times. There's going to be a lot of things you have to talk about that aren't comfortable, right? So I wasn't surprised at that. And we had been doing that for years. But then to have a conversation around, just like things that you would never think. I sometimes still like say something and then we laugh and say like, wow, like I never thought I would say those words ever. But yeah, like to be able to sit with someone that you love that much and have them like watch someone hold and try to grapple with like their own guilt, their own internalized mononormativity, their own like, I want to do this, but I'm terrified of how you're going to take that, or how you're going to feel about that, or how you're going to take it on as something you've done, right? And you mentioned, Kristen, like that obviously there were things that, my partners had to also like figure out and discuss with each other. Not everyone has non-monogamous relationships in that people are friends or friendly or meet each other, but in my life they do. And so that was for them as well. Like they would talk, and one time, I'll never forget this, one time they both came to me together and were like, Jess, you are not responsible for our feelings. Like you need to stop taking all of that onto you, because just because you're the person who brought this up, that does not mean you're responsible for all of this. Like we are adults. We made decisions to do this with you. We consented. And so when you want to, for example, go to this particular event with him and not me, just say that. If you want to go to this particular event with both of us, just say that. And then we'll figure out from there. And obviously there were, a variety of things to think about in terms of how open were we and what will it look like to go to something together, and people will notice, and are we okay with that, and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's like just conversations that you like don't think that you're gonna ever have. I remember the first time I ever asked them, like, would it be cool if I held both of their hands walking down the street, and like, are they comfortable with that? Because that's how I feel I want to do. But I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. I don't want them to feel outed. I don't want them to be, and they were like, the heck with people. People stare no matter what anyway. Just do whatever, right? And that like exhilarating feeling of just like, screw it. I'm just gonna be me, and people can look if they want. So yeah, lots of like talking between myself and my husband, myself and my non-nesting partner, them talking, the 3 of us, and then adding my husband's additional partner, and us all talking about all of this stuff. So yeah, I never in my wildest dreams did I think that this is where I would be and what I'd be talking about, but here we are.
And well, we like to talk too about like your pirate code. Like one of the things with pirates that kept them being able to work together was they had a code. And so whether or not they agreed on everything didn't matter. It just mattered like they knew what the code was, or their values. And so I imagine, like, first of all, it's very important to have that code figured out in order to have a successful relationship, any kind of relationship, honestly. But like the more people you add in, the more you're going to have that code really dialed in too. Yeah. And then I don't know what else I was going to say, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that is absolutely true. I mean, the reality is all four of us slash anyone that I've dated before, my husband's dated before, we all know, just in a very piratey way, right? We know that we are doing something together that is unconventional and is going to get looks, comments, opinions, etc., right? And so in order to stay together on that and support each other, right? Because the reality is other people are not always going to support us in this, right? I think there's things you just have to be on the same page about. And I think number one thing for all of us is this like idea of assuming positive intent, and that no matter what happens, it's not that like my partners have never had a tiff. They certainly have, and they have to work it out amongst themselves because they're adults. It's just this, no matter what happens, we're going to start any conversation by assuming that whatever happened, this person had positive intent. They were not meaning to be deceitful, malicious, hurt me, whatever. And I think that's like something we apply overall, whether it's between two people, 3, 4, that we all know that we're coming from a good place. We all care about each other, whatever level that is. We all obviously don't have all romantic relationships with each other and such, but like we all care about each other. And so starting from a place of like, okay, we're just gonna I'm not gonna go into this conversation assuming that you did XYZ to hurt me, because that's not gonna help anyone. And for the most part, that is the truth, that we're not trying to hurt each other. It happens, right? I think the other thing is like radical honesty, which is the kind of what I was talking about when I say, having conversations you never thought you'd have. Sometimes, like, one of us will say, I don't know, like, I feel like it sounds mean in my head, like whatever it is, whatever my answer is. And the answer is like, just tell me, like, it's okay. Thank you for prefacing. I will take into consideration that what you're about to say might sound some kind of way. And that is the only way we're going to move through this, is by people being honest. Sometimes being honest means that what's in your head doesn't come out of your mouth the way that you wanted it to, right? And so I think we're all very committed to like actually hearing each other out, in what our intention was, not maybe the fumbly, not so great way things came out. And I think, on the whole, like sticking up for each other and standing with each other. If we were ever out and someone made a comment or whatever, like that person is not going to be on their own. Like we're all going to decide together, like we're leaving or we're not engaging in this conversation or whatever, because it's really not anybody else's business or choice. So yeah, and there's probably so many other things, but yeah, I think there definitely is this, like, if we're going to do this, we have to stick together. We have to support each other. And I would say that goes, in my work and with my paying clients, and also with, people who are in my like free Facebook group as well. I think there has to be that, like, we have to stick together. We are all, on the edge of, in some ways, on the edge of society, right? Like people are going to look at us differently. And so we need to, show up for each other too, because that's the only way that we're going to have the support that we need.
Mm-hmm. I can tell Kron's dogs are active.
I like up here WrestleMania happening right now.
Oh my gosh. Hello.
Yeah.
They're so cute.
So just FYI for those that like listen and know my dogs, I got another one and it's big. and they're
all big.
wrestling right now. They were sleeping, and yeah, we hit record, and they decided it was time to get up and wrestle. So,
Of course.
of course. This is why we have YouTube, so people can see two big boys,
Oh my gosh,
two big
they're
boys
huge.
wrestling.
Yeah, those codes, those values, very, very important. Oh, and I had remembered the other part of what I was going to say was I imagine also those need to be revisited often because as things change and as people grow and you learn new things as well, like you've got to come back and look at like, are these ones still my core values, or is this still my core pirate code? Do we need to rewrite anything in there? And yeah, again, coming back to that communication aspect of it. But yeah, I'm guessing those are something that need to be revisited often in order to make sure everybody is feeling, I lost the word I wanted, but yeah, like that everybody's needs are being met. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and a lot of those things, when I think about like, what are the things that we come back to and like revisit and stuff, we start out and I teach people to start out with what are called relationship agreements. So we start with our own personal boundaries, which is the fence you build around yourself. Those are things that only you can control. They do not involve other people. They only involve what you're going to do, how you're going to react to other people. But then, like my husband and I had relationship agreements in the beginning that are absolutely not there anymore. We had some questionable ones in the beginning that, looking back now, I'm like, oh my God, why did we think that was okay? Or why did we think that that was a good thing to do? But, you start somewhere, and I think you have to start somewhere. And I think to create these agreements is a good starting point topically. And, then when you add additional people, there have to be additional like conversations. Like a pretty straightforward one I can think of is we are fortunate to have a guest room in our house. And so our agreement had always been, we will sleep with other partners in the guest room. And that all went well for years until my husband got his second serious partner, and we all went out for New Year's Eve together. And then there was 4 adults in a house in 2 beds, right? And then it was just a conversation first between my husband and I, because that was our agreement in our house, right? And I said, look, clearly this agreement needs to be amended because this is no longer going to work for us for the times where all 4 of us are here. This is just, it has to be, people have to sleep, right? And, I think that's where some of that radical honesty comes in, where I said, look, I know this might sound crazy, but a tiny bit of me feels some kind of way about this. I don't know why. It's been years. I love her to death. I do not actually care about this in any logical way. But there's some tiny part of my brain that's like, that's my bed. That's my room. That's my whatever, right? But that's not real. That's just my brain telling me things, right? So we talked about that. He said, you're all good. Like, I get it. I get why you feel some kind of way. And are you sure that you feel good about this? I said, yep. We did that, and now we just switch. So whenever the 4 of us are here, 2 of us will sleep in one, and then we, just because that's what feels good. But, I think, and then that was something that we had to then like translate to our other partners, right? It's like, this is what we're going to do. Does that feel good with you? We're planning on switching. Is that okay? And they're both like, honestly, very kind, agreeable, chill people. And so they're far less high strung than myself and my husband are, which is a great balance. And so, yeah, they were like, yeah, it's your house. And I'm like, yeah, but also you're in this too. And we want to make sure that nobody feels, uncomfortable. So, and then, it kind of continues. We're planning to take a family vacation to Europe in the fall, the 4 of us. And so had to have a conversation about like, how are we going to do hotel rooms, right? And like, I don't know, there comes a point where you just do. And sometimes it feels weird and awkward, and you just get through it. And again, assume the positive intent and, try to do what the closest thing that feels best for everybody. And I think we all are open enough that we all feel like we could bring something to the table if there was some sort of like discomfort or whatever.
Yeah. And now looking at another side, like when you're talking with your clients too, and they are talking about, hey, we need to tell people in our lives. For our listeners too that are out there that are like, if somebody comes to me and says, this is what I'm making choices for in my life. For people that want to be the best support system that they can, like what are some things that others can do as well to prepare themselves in case they do have these types of conversations coming up so that they can meet their friends wherever they are.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would love people to take a proactive approach, because you really, you think you know people, but I think when we live in a world where like to some extent we're encouraged to like shove so much of ourselves down and fit the mold and walk the path and all that stuff, you never know what people are going to uncover about themselves at any point in their life. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that overall, it would benefit people to, of course, it's hard because when we look online at things, we need to be vigilant about our sources and where things are coming from, right? But I think even just starting at like looking up, like, what are different relationship structures? Like, what even is there? And if you are a monogamous person or at least date that way or whatever, just understanding, okay, there's monogamy and non-monogamy. That's semi-explanatory, right? And then within non-monogamy, we've got polyamory, swingers, open relationships, monogamish. We've got one-sided openness, like just to have like an idea that these other things are out there. And so I think that would help to like, I think if people came to you and shared this with you and it wasn't the very first time you've ever heard or read anything about this, that would be helpful. And I think, you could say like, oh, I've heard of that, right? But, tell me more about what that looks like for you, because as we started talking about in the beginning with labels, just because someone says I'm a swinger or I'm polyamorous or I'm whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean that that looks exactly like you may have read or thought about it. So I think, things like that, like looking up some like general information. There are some great like nonprofit organizations that have stuff out like that. There also are, there are a million podcasts. So I think, looking up some of that stuff and like even just getting a general familiarity is helpful, so that perhaps you're not like as caught off guard if someone were to come to you. And then I think overall, like I would tell people to just like try your very best, if you remember nothing else, to lead with curiosity and not judgment, right? It's okay to have questions. It's also okay for those people to choose not to answer your questions, but it's okay to have questions. It's okay to wonder things. It's okay, all of that stuff. Obviously, there are some questions that could be worded differently. As a coach, I feel like I mostly take those things pretty well because I'm at this point have coached a lot of people through those kind of things. But, we want to like just make sure that the way we're asking things is coming from a place of curiosity and like, can you tell me what that looks like for you? Or can you tell me why it was important to you to share this with me? Or can you tell me, like, is there anything that you can think of that I can do to support you? Like, and that person might say, no, like, I just wanted you to be informed and that's the end of it. People might say, I've sent people, my family and friends, podcast episodes or articles or whatever. And I think that overall, like, just trying to get a picture and ideally, if we can, an accurate picture. I think especially recently, polyamory has been like there's been a boom in the news and social media. There was a New Yorker article that was talked about on The View. There was like a whole bunch of things. And I wouldn't say that any of those, in my opinion, particularly accurately depicted this, right? So, I think going to things like organizations or coaches, therapists, people who, do this for a living, is helpful just to get a general idea. So you're a little bit more in the know, I think would be helpful.
Well, and I'm curious, what were some of the like inaccuracies with like that mainstream media?
Yeah, I think between, I feel like it all runs together sometimes. I think in general, there's also a reality TV show called Couple to Throuple that's on right now. That has been very interesting. I've only watched a little bit because it's like I have to professionally, but also it hurts me sometimes inside. But yeah, I think some of the inaccuracies are a lot surrounding like myths around non-monogamy. Like a lot of times it will be painted as like people who are non-monogamous just want to have sex with everyone. Okay. First of all, we could just not shame people for wanting to have sex. It's really okay. And secondly, that is a really, really distilled down picture of what choosing this looks like for people. Also, there are folks like on the ace spectrum that are non-monogamous, and sex is not part of the picture at all. And so I think, things like that where overall we're taking like a whole group of people and distilling it down to this one thing. It's all about sex, or it only looks like this, or every couple who's going into non-monogamy is looking for a third, right? Like that show. I think there have been some good, relatively good pieces to some of these in terms of like, I think to some there's been a lot of rhetoric around like no press is bad press or whatever, any press is good press, whatever. And so, is that true, right? Like, are we happy as a community to see anyone talking about this in any regard? I mean, yes and no, right? It's better to have something out there, right? Because some of these things are saying some legitimate things. But also there is harm in, distilling everyone's experience down to this one specific kind of way. Or I think another thing is like the dramatization, right? Like when we are speaking about this in the media, we want it to sell, whether that's financially sell or, be popular, right? And so I think there can be a lot of like kind of harping on specific dramatic points around this just to be interesting. It's interesting and it's my life, like this is, so yeah, I hope that the more that comes out I hope the more comes out, the more people will look to people who are more or less experts, right? Who either are professionals and or are real life individuals living this and can at very least speak to their own experience and then get a more like wide array of stories out there. I think would be ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you were saying that, I was trying to think of like in movies or shows, if they ever portray any non-monogamous type relationship, it's usually an orgy or a threesome or something like that. And yeah, there's not like what you were talking about with your relationship. That's not typically portrayed as non-monogamous. That would be on a show called cheating or not making your mind up or something like that. Instead of it being considered like we're in a consensual non-monogamous relationship. So yeah, like as you were talking, I was thinking through how it gets portrayed, and I was like, no, this is like
that pretty much is.
These conversations are good to have in order to begin to understand as well. Like, no, like not everybody sees relationships the same way, and the media definitely does not portray them accurately. So
no, it's not great. It's not great. And people, I always find it very interesting when people either like on television or in an article or whatever will say reasons that they are anti or against non-monogamy, which you can make that choice. You don't have to do it. But I think what's interesting is that when people make that claim, what they often back their claim up with are things that are largely not true. And so it's like, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but maybe let's like get some at least like personal facts, right? Like this is my life experience, even if not like, a professional. Like I just think people are quick to form opinions and judge things that they don't know. And I think that's why I do these podcasts and all this, right? To like get some word out there that this can look so different for people. And there can be literally 1 million reasons why people choose to have relationships this way. It can be like I feel like I've always been this way kind of thing, or it could just be, this is just what works for me. This is what makes me happy. I enjoy getting to know and connecting with different people. I like going on dates. I like having sex with different people, like whatever it is. There's a million reasons why someone chooses this, and there's a million ways that it can look. And I think the less that we try to, I think what's always funny to me is the entire point of non-monogamy is to stop putting yourself in a box. And then we try to put it in a box. That's just not how it works. And everyone in my community, like we are all humans. And so we are also guilty of this. It is not that like everyone in my community is immune. There definitely are people. I mean, I was like this too at some point where, oh, but that's not that, that's this, right? That's not the right definition, whatever. But at the end of the day, like, this is not about policing people's behavior. And so, I think we just need to get more out there in an honest way, and hopefully, kind of counteract or at least, mirror some of the like not so accurate depictions that we're getting.
Cool. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you wanted to kind of mention?
What a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about so many things. I think a lot of the things I try to get out there are like these kind of myths, right? It's all about sex. You can't possibly be committed. That's just cheating. That's my favorite. Like, I'm sorry, what's cheating? Lying. This is not that. Okay, well, this is not the same thing. People will insist to me though, like you can call it whatever you want, Jess, it's still cheating. And I'm like, okay, well then if you don't want cheating in your relationship, then don't do it. Yeah, I think a lot of it is like the myth kind of things. Also, I think what's funny is like my life is a lot more boring than people might think. We just had our first I think sometimes people wonder this when someone that they care about comes to them and tells them this, right? Like, what is this going to look like if this is a situation in which they're bringing other partners or connections or friends with benefits or whatever into the fold in some way? What's that going to be like? And we just had our first like holiday where the four of us were together at a parent's house, and it was like the most boring, normal, like it is not, you would not know just looking at us, right? It's not like the room is on fire or like anything crazy happening. It's just four adults who care about each other eating turkey. Like, it's not,
You're not making out the whole entire time. Not
no.
like what?
I mean, like there is, I mean, of course, like there's some level, and of course we had to talk about that on the drive there, right? Like about physical affection, right? Like I'm gonna be standing there talking to whomever we're visiting, and my husband might come behind me and like pat my butt or like give me a hug or whatever. And then my other partner might also do that. So yes, like there's some level of like people like do a double take. But no, we're not like all sitting there, all four of us in one big chair making out or whatever. I don't even know what to think is happening. And if that is happening in the privacy of your own home or Airbnb or whatever, cool. You do you, but like we are also just normal people. We go to work, it's not this like crazy like our eyes don't turn red or something. It's, not vampires. Yeah, I don't know. It's just funny to me how normal it really is. And it's, like when we're with friends, it's just like adding more friends. It's not this weird thing. So yeah, I mean, I always just try to convey that, people are just living their lives. It's just a little bit different than yours. It's okay.
You mean you're still a person too?
Yeah, I'm still a person. I'm still
What?
someone's wife. I'm still, whatever else. Just because I have two partners doesn't mean that I don't care about the first one, or I'm playing with the second one, or we're some weird, I don't even know what. Yeah, I mean, like in my life, we take care of each other. We show up. I mean, we've had death in the family recently, and we all like, one of them was cuddling me. One of them was making me toast because that's my sad food. One of them, my husband's partner, made me tea like 400 times. It's like just a normal, like I just have more people. That's all. So yeah, I am a person. We all are, in fact, people.
And where can our listeners go to find out more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So my coaching company is called Both And, because both and both and coaching. So that's my website, bothandcoaching.com. I'm also on Facebook. Like I mentioned, I have a free Facebook group. We're approaching like 600 members now. It's awesome. People ask questions, and it's really like a beautiful communal space where I just watch people be so kind to each other and like share their experience, but in a non-judgmental way. So if you search non-monogamous newbies, you'll find my Facebook group. I'm on Instagram under the same name. But yeah, I think Facebook's a good place to start if you haven't, or a website, and you can email me from there, all that stuff. If anyone's, thinking about this, or, has been doing this a while, needs help, just wants community. I'm in the midst of, I just hit my 1-year anniversary with my business. And so I'm in the midst of coming up with additional programs. So it won't just be the like newbies thing per se. There'll be other things as well in the future. So I'd love anyone to come follow me, join my group, email me, whatever. I do not bite, I promise.
And we like to wrap with asking for any advice you may have for our listeners for starting their own pirate journey. So yeah, what recommendation do you have?
Yeah, what a good question. I think that when it comes to being a pirate, it's very much starts as an internal journey, right? And so I think anything that you can do to like, and it doesn't have to be these like societal bonds, right? But anything you can do to like tap into like the internal version of you, and just start by questioning things, right? And that doesn't mean that every time you question something, you're like, oh yeah, that's not for me. That's not for me. You might find that a lot of things that you do want and do feel do align with like the norm, quote unquote. And that's cool. But I think just starting like, again, just like we meet other people with curiosity, meeting yourself there and trying to be kind to yourself when you're thinking through some stuff, because it is hard to be a pirate, to look in yourself in that way when it's not something you're accustomed to doing and not something that people necessarily encourage, hence why we're pirates. So I think we're just misunderstood. And, I think just taking time for you, whatever that looks like, to look at your life and the people in it and what you're doing, and feel like what really like brings you joy, what really fills you up, what really feels like in your body, like a full body yes, instead of this like resistance. That's a good place to start.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing all of your story and being so open with us. And yeah, we really appreciated talking to you today.
Mhm.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.